Viewing life from a hearse, it could be worse. Laugh, think, and cry with the country undertaker.
Against all odds, and despite pushback from reasonable people, including his own father, my guest jumped off the cliff anyway. This cliff jump consisted of putting all his life savings on the line to build a racetrack in the little town of Reynolds, Georgia. As a kid, he measured the cotton field across the road of his parents' house by using the odometer on his bicycle. He knew there was enough land to make it work. His love and passion for racing came early in life. He remembers getting in a fight with his best friend in grade school because his friend talked bad about his racing hero. As the passion grew, so did the dream. Build it and they will come. He built it. He leveraged the farm and turned a dadgum cotton field into a racetrack, but only after much effort and painstaking steps to make sure he understood the business part of racing. He gives much credit to a local citizen who caught the vision early on that many others could not see and helped pave the way to get healthy support from a rather reluctant community. His path was not easy. My guest endured many sleepless nights, not only in planning and operating a racetrack and the intense financial pressures that come with such a venture, but also in the fact that he went through 4 wives in the process. Thankfully, he eventually found Dorothy as wife number 5, and whose term has now surpassed the sum of the years of the first 4. A keeper for sure. The original vision has come to fruition, as now thousands flock to Reynolds on a regular basis to participate. The venture put Reynolds on the map, and the financial impact of the surrounding community has been great and will be difficult to even measure. By the way, this now retired 74-year-old dreamer and entrepreneur not only lived out his dream, but he eventually found himself being inducted into the National Hot Rod Association Hall of Fame. And his racing hero, that was the reason for the playground fight with his best friend, his cell phone number is now in the address book on his iPhone. To win in life, you have to be willing to lose. This is the story of Ed Swearingen and the Silver Dollar Raceway.
She's the queen of the silver dollar. She rules the smoky kingdom. The scepter is a wine glass, and the bar stool is her throne.
This is the View from a Hearse podcast, which really means that we look at life with the end in mind. And I have a lifelong friend of mine today as a guest. His name is Ed Swearingen. And Ed Swearingen put Reynolds, Georgia on the map. When I used to go around speaking, I was literally speaking in every county for years at all these Chamber of Commerces. I would always ask, does anybody know where Reynolds, Georgia is? There were always hands that came up. There were a couple of 3 things that people would say, but they would always say the Silver Dollar Raceway and Ed Swearingen. Because there's a heck of a lot of people that come to Reynolds to the Silver Dollar Raceway, and the reason they do is because of my guest on the line. So, Ed, I hope you can hear me.
I'm loud and clear.
Thank you. So, Ed, I noticed the Georgia Strawberry Festival obviously was in Reynolds, and I was out there. I went by the strawberry patch. Number one, that's the most people I've ever seen in Reynolds, Georgia in my life, and I'm not kidding. And then when I got out to the strawberry patch, I saw how many people were at that racetrack. And I know you founded that racetrack. You sold it since. I know you're still involved with it, and you actually racing out there this weekend. But just give us a little bit of what's going on out there. That was televised. They were streaming live across the country. I don't know how many people were there. I'm sure you got an idea. 10,000 people or so were there?
Well, in Reynolds, they say there were 30,000 people total. Now, that sounds a little optimistic to me. I don't know about that, but the National Hot Rod Association, the NHRA, is divided into 7 divisions, and we're in the second division that includes everything from parts of Virginia all the way through Tennessee and Alabama, Georgia, South Carolina, Florida, and Puerto Rico. And we have divisional events that are sponsored by the Lucas Oil Company. And that's what we were having this weekend. The Lucas Oil Drag Racing Series was here. And there are only 42 of them in the whole nation. So if you're chasing points, you have to go to these races. Followed up on Sunday, we had a NHRA National Open, which is something the division does. But we had people from Indiana and everywhere else all over the United States represented here on Saturday at the event that they were running that day.
Well, what's amazing to me is I remember vividly, and it doesn't seem like it was that long ago, although it was, when this was just a dream. You just took some land and you began saying, I think I'm going to open up a racetrack. And a lot of people thought you had lost your mind. I know there were hurdles of people in town. We don't want to bring riffraff into town with a racetrack, which is obviously not the case at all.
No.
It's been so good for the town, for the county, for the area. Let's just talk a little bit about how that came about. I guess we first talk about your family a little bit, Ed. I know you had wonderful parents.
Well, Mother and Daddy grew up, they weren't very affluent. They had to save their pennies and dimes to get up enough money to start buying farmland. And they bought the property the racetrack now sits on. And I remember one day as a little boy, I had a bicycle with an odometer on it. And I went in the backside of the cotton field and drove from one end to the other and reported to my father that we had enough room there to put a drag strip on. And he said, don't ever bring that up again. Said, that's the craziest thing. We're going to grow cotton and soybeans, and to heck with that idea. And of course, I didn't bring it up till long after you conducted his funeral back in 1978. And that's when I kind of renewed my interest in building a drag strip there.
What year did you start the racetrack?
We didn't actually start it till 93.
Okay.
I started racing in the early 80s and tried to get enough experience racing to know how a drag strip should be built. If we were going to build one, we wanted it to be state of the art, and we wanted it to be responsible as far as noise concerns and especially safety. We wanted one that would sort of raise the bar for safety standards. So you can't do that unless you know something about drag racing. So I started racing at the divisional and national level, started running a car in Indianapolis and Houston, Texas, and Memphis, everywhere I could go to race, I did, and picked up pointers from those races.
How did you get the bug to begin with to get into racing as a kid?
I had it. I was a car nut. You know, Bruce, my uncle was the Chevrolet dealer here.
Yep, Bob Swearingen. Yep.
Yeah. I was an absolute nut for cars, and I wanted to drag race. Mama and Daddy wouldn't let me when I should have been doing it at a young age. But I had that pent-up desire to go down the track, and it all came to fruition back in 1982 when I first went to the drag strip and participated.
So I don't know, you don't mind me saying it. I'm 67, 6. What are you? 73.
74.
74 years old.
Yeah.
And
I remember you as a young'un. That one of your best friends, Jimmy Childry. He's my cousin, and I remember being left with him and all those wild children to look after.
Jimmy and I talk every week, sometimes 2 or 3 times a week.
A Chevrolet man just bought a Ford. It was actually my wife's doings. But
I bet you did. I want people to understand, you went to the University of Georgia. You were very smart. You graduated from Georgia. You're very interested in politics. You were one of the first Republicans, one of the few Republicans back before it was popular to be Republicans in our county, right?
Yeah, I was a Republican before it was cool, you know.
You were.
I read Barry Goldwater's book, 1964, Conscience of the Conservative, and I decided, hey, I'm one of those. And decided that we needed a two-party system in Georgia.
Well,
And,
you were a minority in those days, but you stuck to your guns all these years. There's no question about that. And I also know you're a pilot, and I know you don't probably fly anymore, but you flew all around. You do all kind of stuff. So talk a little bit about that.
yeah, I went to college. Daddy gave me $1,000 every quarter, and I left with a degree and a pilot's license. I managed to get a side job for $5 a night when I was in Americas going to Georgia Southwestern before I went to the University of Georgia, and it paid $5 a night. And you could rent an airplane in those days for $20 an hour with the instructor. And so I managed to get a pilot's license before I transferred up there. And it paid off. We ultimately got an airplane and did volunteer flying for the Republican Party. I flew Senator Mattingly all over the place and met a lot of interesting people by being able to do that.
You're a diverse kind of fellow. There's no question about it. You always have been. You got a heck of a lot of friends. I mean, people love you. Politics aside, back in those days, you could be a Republican and get along with the Democrats. All that's changed a little bit, or be a Democrat and get along with the Republicans, either side.
People have been real good to me, Bruce. They've given me the benefit of a lot of doubts. They sure have.
Well, you've earned it, I can tell you that. I also know, and I happen to know, you joke about this, you've been married several times. You have been through some women. I know that.
I had a roommate in college named Eddie Bird, and he's been married as many times as I have, and we thought about opening up a marriage clinic.
That's great.
But anyway, that's the truth. So,
well, that's all right. Well, you've landed on one now. You and Dorothy have been married, what, a long time? How long?
We are about to have an anniversary this week. And we have now been married. The sum, if you add the other four together, the tenure that they had in years, Dorothy has now surpassed the other four, the sum of the other four.
How about that?
Can I tell who married the?
Yeah, go for it. That's a great story. I'll never forget it.
Yeah, it is. I was about to marry my fourth wife. And by the way, I've kept all my in-laws. I've accumulated in-laws. I've got 5 sets of in-laws I still claim kinship to.
I'm sure. But, they all love you, I'm sure.
My fourth wife and I decided we wanted you to perform the ceremony in your official capacity as coroner. So we went to the probate judge to get the license, and he said, well, who's going to perform the ceremony? And I said, I think we'll have Bruce Goddard if he'll do it. And the probate judge said, no way. Said the coroner can't perform the ceremony. And I reminded him that you were an elected official countywide and you could lock up the sheriff, that you were a very powerful elected official, and indeed you could perform the ceremony. Well, he said that was not the case. I was friends with Mr. Garland Byrd, who had been lieutenant governor in Georgia, and he was one of my Democrat friends. As you said, you could be friends across party lines then. I walked across the street to his law office and mentioned that. He said, sit right here. I'll be back in a minute. So he comes back with a document. I heard him laughing and talking on the phone in the other room. He was on the phone with the Attorney General of the state of Georgia, who sent him a text message that said anybody could perform the ceremony provided they had a license and their credentials were accepted by the parties getting married. So that is why you were able to perform the ceremony.
So my side of the story, of course, I was friends with the probate judge too, Ronnie Parker, and he didn't like the idea that you were considering me to do that wedding. But after you told me that, we did it, and then when you were gone on your honeymoon, I get a call from the state vital records people. I don't know if I ever told you this. I get a call, and I'm sure they had called Ronnie, and he told them to call me. But they said that this has got to be a mistake. We're looking at the marriage license, and you've signed it as the coroner. She said the coroner can't sign this. I said, well, you need to let me know quickly because they're on the honeymoon. I need to get them back. So I said, you need to talk to your boss, because I just had a very prominent attorney give my friend advice and said I could. And so she called back, and the next morning her boss called and said, yes, indeed, you can. I said, we're good, because now they're into the second day of the honeymoon. It'd be hard to get them back. That is a true story. You
established the precedent there.
So going back to when you started this track and the racetrack in 93, it was a big leap of faith. I mean, one of the things that I talk about, and I know it's true, and I know this is part of the way you think, most people live pretty defensive lives, and they're trying to keep from losing. trying to keep status quo and kind of stay under the radar. Some people put themselves out there, and I have come to understand that the real winners have to be willing to lose. When you opened that track, it was not like you had $1 million to the side you could go invest in this. You were putting up your life right there. You were gambling it all. I know it was calculated risk. You thought you could do it. You're not dumb. That you're very smart, so I know you had an idea. Talk a little bit about that leap of faith you took when you did that.
Well, we tried to cover those bases too, Bruce. We had Dick Moroso was a Georgia Tech graduate that started manufacturing valve covers while he was still a student at Georgia Tech. And he went on and became a very, very successful businessman making performance products. And he started the Moroso Performance Company. And he was in Connecticut with his manufacturing, but he bought property in South Florida at West Palm Beach, built a racetrack down there, and he's very influential with the NHRA. And so I called him and said, finally got to talk to him, his people, if you will, the people that insulate him from folks like me, told him there's some idiot in Georgia planning to build a racetrack and wants you to call back. Well, he did. He called me and said, what can I do to help you with this project? I would like to know whether your facility there in West Palm Beach is a loss or something that you do to save on taxes, or is it actually a profitable business? And he said, don't tell anybody, but I'm going to send you my income statement. And he did. And I showed it to the bank, sort of adjusted the figures down to our market as compared to his. And we thought we had a winner here. You know,
Right.
We decided we'd take a chance on it. And of course, when I went to get the loan, the figures didn't satisfy the bank. And I said, well, give me the paper back. We changed the figures. We didn't know how many people we were going to have. So we put the number of spectators and the car count down that it would take to ring the bell so we could borrow the money and get started. During the course of all that, Dick Moroso said back then Winston was the sponsor instead of Lucas Oil like we have now. He said, I have a Winston Series event here in West Palm, and those people who are in our division who live in Memphis, Tennessee, have to drive, over 1,000, probably 1,200 miles to get here. And he said, we don't need this event on the edge of the division. What if I give you our Winston race? And I thought that was just awfully nice of Mr. Moroso. He really encouraged us. And after he said that, about 30 minutes later, I got a call from Glendora, California, from the NHRA, the powers that be there in Glendora, and said, Dick Moroso has suggested we move his event to your track. Can you be ready by July the 4th, 1994? Well, we were really having to step on the gas to get ready by then. And Lord, I remember in January of 94, a few days before your father died, he was at the racetrack and he said, you know, all my life I've wanted to see something like this happen in Reynolds, and I'm going to live to see it. And of course, he didn't live to see us open, but he was awfully close on that.
Yeah, he was a big fan of what you were doing. I mean, he was.
Well,
Was his...
I'm going to tell you, locally, he was our Dick Moroso at the local level. He helped us so much. He went with me to the Garden Ladies Club, you know, the ladies club that met here in Reynolds. Of course, they were concerned. And some retired people who lived here in Reynolds. Some of them were close friends of your father. And one in particular, I know you know who I'm talking about, said he doesn't need to do that close to my house. And Mr. Ed said, let's see how it turns out. Let's give it a shot. Don't fuss about it till after the fact. He turned out to be, the individual involved there turned out to be very supportive of the track. Mr. Ed won him over.
You had hurdles. I mean, you had the financial hurdles. You had the people. People never heard of a racetrack. Didn't know what to expect.
We had done some research on noise footprints. I remember all these tracks I went to. I had a little motor scooter, and I'd get on it and drive as far from the starting line as some of these houses were. And we wanted to see what our noise footprint was going to be like. And we came to the conclusion that it wasn't going to be a terrible bad thing. But
well, you did a lot of work. You researched it. You knew what you were doing, and you just need somebody helping you block and tackle to get it up and going. I'm sure early on when you started doing this, you had some sleepless nights, and you're probably counting the ceiling tiles with the financial situation.
Talking about,
yeah,
I wore out many a sheet. Sure did.
I mean, you do. I mean, that's just part of it. It's
Yeah.
a financial chance you took, and it wasn't all gravy right off the start, right?
Yeah. We had help from the NHRA. There was a Mr. McMurtry out there who was the facilities director, and he gave us some real good advice about construction. The race that we were going to have on July the 4th of 94, the one I just mentioned that Dick Moroso got for us, that was the weekend Hurricane Alberto dropped 18 inches of rain on Reynolds. And as you know, the cemeteries down in Montezuma were emptied as the bodies came up out of the grave because of the flooding.
That was the big flood of 94, yeah.
The roads washed away, and there were no groceries in the grocery store, and we had to reschedule the race twice, and it was an economic disaster for us and a heck of a way to get started.
Oh, my goodness.
We actually opened in April and sort of seasoned the track so that we'd be ready for the event come July, but it was a mess. And people from New York were here that had funny cars and dragsters that were capable of 260 miles an hour and 18-wheelers and big rigs, and they couldn't get back to get them. One fellow with an accent named Tony Bartone, he's a paving contractor from New York, and he called and said in his accent that he had, "Ed, I'm coming after my car." And I said, "No, sir, Mr. Bartone, you can't get your car." "What do you mean I can't get my car?" I said, "There's no road to get here."
And that was literally true. That was literally true.
Yeah.
I had somebody die right in the middle of that, and in town, and I was living out by the golf course. I had to go all the way to Kroll and around to Butler and come back to Reynolds to go pick him up because the road was completely washed away on 128. I'll never forget that.
You couldn't cross the bridges.
No.
The bridge on 96 was closed, 128, the bridge in every direction out of town was closed by the state patrol.
But it wasn't just closed; the whole road was washed away. You couldn't, if they'd had it open, you couldn't, unless you swam across it. You couldn't. You couldn't have got there. Well, I know that eventually, as happens many times, all the hurdles, all the drama, all the anguish and the stress you were in, you begin to see, wow, maybe we're going to be able to do this after all, right? So kind of talk a little about how that came about.
Well, by around 2000, I mean, it took 6-7 years through struggles along in there, and we came close. I've got to admit, we couldn't pay what we owed, and we had to sell assets. We sold all the farmland that we had left and put it in it, and every my retirement IRA and all, it went into it. I was riding in a car that I paid $1,200 for because everything else had gone into it. You know, we began to see daylight around 2000. We began to cash flow, and we had opportunity. Federal Mogul came on board as a sponsor, replacing Winston when Winston got out of motorsports. That was a great relationship with the Federal Mogul Corporation. Now, you may not recognize that name, but they own Champion Spark Plugs and, you know, a lot of smaller companies, but they wanted recognition as the company that owned all those companies. So they gave us an advertising budget, and we advertised, and we were drawing a couple of thousand people as spectators. And again, we were having 300-400 cars to come to that event every year. And Summit Racing Equipment, the people that have that beautiful store there in McDonough, was sponsoring the other series that we were running on the local level. We got to rocking and rolling along in there.
There's a lesson in that because there are people, life isn't easy, and it's not always, you make a decision, you eventually get there, but there's a lot of places where you wonder, I did the wrong thing. I'm in a mess here, you know? You had to be there.
I told the bank, I have jumped off the cliff. I'm just hoping that I land in that little spot of water down there.
Yeah, you know? Isn't that amazing?
There was no turning back.
Yeah.
You know,
you took a chance, and there's no question. It was not like Elon Musk is doing that. You had whatever how many billions of dollars you can afford to do this. You invested your life into this, and it was not easy to get there. Ed, I'll never forget at the beginning. I meant to mention this. You guys were doing some promotions, and somehow or another, I went out in my wife's Ford Aerostar van, and it was advertised. You remember that?
Yes, I do.
And I raced my sister-in-law, Mia, in her Chevrolet Astro van. I'll never forget. I left her, and people were placing bets on us. It was great, and I never raced in my life, but I pulled away from her, And then I got towards the end. I wasn't sure how long that track was. I started slowing down before I got there.
Well, we had room to run a 300-mile-an-hour car and the chute failed and you still stopped. So we had over 3,000 feet of shutdown.
But I didn't have sense enough to know that. I'm just running wide open and thinking I don't want to run off into the highway. Oh, my, that was funny. I was laughing so hard I couldn't drive for laughing because I could see her in my rearview mirror.
One of the things we did, an important part of the program sponsored by AAA, on Friday night, we'd let people just come out, and there was no competition. You make as many passes as you wanted to down the track, and it took away any excuse people might have to do illegal street racing, which we were fighting. You know, that was one of the reasons the NHRA was founded by Wally Parks back there in 1951, was to fight illegal street racing and improve safety. They helped us a lot, and we had the experience when we built the track. At the time, though, we met resistance with some of the more advanced safety things we were going to do. The state of Georgia literally would not let us. The fire marshal's office was not, at the time, friendly to motorsports, and they prevented us from building a concrete barrier wall like we wanted to, and said that that wasn't safe. But in fact, it's safer than what we wound up having to build to please them. But now they have reversed all that, and they are really accepting the advice of the NHRA and the insurance companies and the people that have been doing it for some period of time.
I also know that you've had some key people out there that have been a big part of that not only that you helped, but they helped you to get off. There was so much going on. Technology, the electronics. I can't even imagine. There's a team of people that around you that made that happen, right? And that's another lesson. You surround yourself with the right people.
You know, in the 23 years we ran the track, I looked the other day, it takes about 24 people to staff it. We actually have over 400 names of former employees. The reason for that is, like, the gate people were typically high school girls that went off to college, and there was quite a bit of rotation in staffing at the front gate and the concession stand and like that, where we were able to use 18-year-olds that came out and wanted a part-time job. Through the years, we've had Lamar Cox was one of the managers that was with us the longest. He was there for a long time, and till his health got bad, and mine did too, and we were about ready to sell out. So we have had a lot of support from local people who literally worked there for way under what they were worth.
I'm sure.
You know, they did it because they loved the sport and they were promoting the community, and they were real nice to the customers. And that's why these people came such distances. People from Oregon, for instance, showing up for a Lucas race because they needed points, and we had a reputation of treating the customers well when they got here. The community was good to them.
You guys had a passion. The people that you had working there had a passion. Their biggest motive was to make sure that we keep this going, that we're successful. Yeah. So it took people with expertise. Yeah. I remember you even had John Gordon. Didn't he help you out there? He was
John
like
Gordon
brilliant.
Was an absolute genius when it came to computers, and the manufacturer of the computer, who, by the way, was another Georgia Tech graduate. The CompuLink system's a very complicated, sophisticated timing device that gives the driver's reaction time to the thousandths of a second and all the incremental times to a thousandth. And it was a PC-based thing, and John worked on it, and we had some things done with that computer that he was not supposed to be able to do. And when the guy that designed it found out what we had done, he was very protective of his proprietary technology that he had in there. He was concerned that John might have been able to copy all that.
He probably could have. I mean, the guy was brilliant. He spent a lot of time at our house. He just, as you know, he just passed away. It's a terrible story. The guy could have worked for a Fortune 500 company, and I mean, he was absolutely brilliant. And I'll tell you a funny story here with John Gordon. My middle son, his academic life, it took a while for him to catch on, and he came home one time and had a very good report card, and we just couldn't believe it. And you get a slip of paper's computer printout, and Kathy saw one of his teachers at church on Wednesday night and said, "Man, I am so proud of John said, "What do you mean?" He said, "Well, he made good grade." I said, "What?" I said, "Look, John Gordon had gone in and adjusted his grades." He'd gone in the system.
I'm not surprised.
Yeah.
I'm not
I
surprised.
did find out later from him, he really didn't go in and change the permanent records. He changed whatever it was in the computer so it would look like that John had a reprieve. That was funny. Yeah, he was very smart. And I know you had other people. You eventually decided to sell this thing. Tell me how that came. You did that like 4 or 5 years ago. Has it been that long?
5 years ago,
Yeah.
they in March they completed their 5th year, and we sold it to a couple from Long Island, New York, who has adjusted well to rentals, and we're mighty proud to have the Persico family here with us. My health was going downhill. As you know, I was born with spina bifida and wasn't supposed to be able to ride motorcycles and do what all I've done physically. And so I praise the Lord for what I got out of my body till it started to get to be a problem when I got over 60 years old. And now I'm walking with a stick. And Bruce, at 74 years old, Dorothy and I, it's time to slow down a little bit. And
absolutely. Well, you should. So, but you're still involved out there, right?
Yeah, we are participants now. We're customers.
Yeah.
It's just across the highway, as you know. The starting line is about half a mile from where I'm sitting. We tow over there. We don't tow out of town much anymore because you're going to have flat tires on the trailer and bearings to go bad. And, I just don't know if I'm safe on long trips with a motorhome pulling a 22-foot enclosed trailer.
Well, the other thing I know that you have met some interesting people in your life through this race.
Yeah, we were able to go to Pomona 3 times during the course of our ownership. And the NHRA had always put us up in the tower and treat us royally because we had gone with our racers who had accomplished enough to go out there and run for national title or something. And one day I'm sitting there punching Dorothy and I said, "Who is this guy I'm sitting next to over here?" I said, "I know him. He's been at our track or something." It turned out to be Chip Foose, the guy that's on TV all the time. I'd seen him on TV. And one time I was in the tower out there doing a live radio thing with Rick Knight back home in Macon at WDEN on my bag phone. I had a bag phone, and sitting next to me was the sheriff of Los Angeles County. And Rick said, are you comfortable going live? And I said, "Man, yeah, I want to go live. I want to tell everybody what's going on here in Pomona and how the locals are doing and all that." But we had a young lady, attractive young lady that showed up driving a funny car at a Lucas race, and she won. I mean, this is a 260-mile-an-hour car that was running in the 560 range along in there 5.6 seconds in the quarter mile. And so she's sitting there getting a picture made, tears running down her cheek. She's hugged all our EMTs, just the sweetest lady. And she's on the phone and she says, "Daddy, I couldn't have done it without you. It's a highlight of my life. I've won this event, my first, and said I couldn't do it without you. And I just want you to know how much I appreciate it." So I'm punching the division director of the NHRA. And I said, "By the way, who is Daddy?" And he said his name is John Paul DeGioia, and he owns the Tequila Patron Company and the Paul Mitchell Hair Care Company, and he's worth $4 billion with a B dollars. And I said, "My gosh, he's the guy on TV." Yeah, that's him. She had just won her first event here.
And she was in
Every
Reynolds.
time I've run into her since, I've reminded her of that.
And she was in Reynolds, Georgia.
Yes,
Amazing.
And another time we had John Force. Now, if you're a drag racer, you know who John Force is. He's a 16-time world funny car champion, and he's currently sponsored by Chevrolet. And he's got all the big dogs behind him. He's the greatest guy since Big Daddy Don Garlitz to come down the pike. Well, he has 3 daughters, and the oldest was with us. She was fixing to transition into a pro team and give up the 270-mile-an-hour alcohol car and go professional. Well, the year she raced here and really was a fan favorite. She was sweet as she could be. We expected a spoiled brat, and we got anything but. She was nice to our customers, and Dorothy had bought 20 little Mattel dolls in her likeness and had them in the souvenir building. And, of course, when they unloaded the great big 18-wheeler that had been here all week, they set dolls out. And I said, well, sir, if we'd known you were going to bring dolls, we wouldn't have bought all those dolls. He said, well, I'll put mine up. Said, we don't want to compete with you. Well, come Friday night, all our dolls were gone. We were selling them, and I went out there and said, put your dolls back out. Said, we're out of them. So he puts out all these dolls. Well, by Sunday afternoon, he's out. So this little girl gets $20 from Daddy and goes over there and said, I want one of those dolls, please, please, sir. And the man said, I'm sorry, we don't have any more. She overheard it and went in the trailer and said, young lady, would you like a first edition? I was saving this because they don't make them exactly like this anymore, but you can have this one. Little girl's so happy.
How about that?
And, that's how sweet she was. The following year, when she turned pro, I believe it was 2007, her teammate, Eric Medlin, got killed in a testing accident. And Ford Motor Company got involved in all of it, and they redesigned funny cars and added all kinds of safety equipment. But by the end of the year, her daddy, John Force, had had a terrible crash in, I believe it was Dallas or Houston, and it crushed his legs. And they said he'd probably not walk again. He's certainly out of the funny car business. But he went to rehab, and he got the use of his legs back. And late the next year, they were back racing. Well, that following year, they didn't do squat. They had so many things working against them. But the following year, they had their act back together, and they were racing at the Southern Nationals up in Commerce, Georgia. I was following the ladder, coming down on each side. Here's John winning round after round, and his daughter winning the other side of the ladder, Ashley. And dawned on me that they're fixing to run each other in the finals, and he's fixing to win his 1,000th round of competition, or she's going to win her first national event. And I started thinking about Ann, my daughter Ann. I said, how does John Force feel? He's sitting there on the other side of the track from his daughter. How would I feel if that were Ann over there? I felt tears running down my cheek because knowing how sweet she was and how we were pulling for the family. Well, anyway, Dorothy punches Jeb, her son, and said, look, the old boy's over here crying over a drag race. Well, I was emotional. It did bother me that I was. She goes on and wins the event. She's being interviewed by ESPN, used to cover before Fox came along and took over. They were interviewing her, and she's getting all her awards on the stage. And I'm in the back of the crowd back there, and I hear this fella coming through the crowd, and he says, where's Swearingen? And I raised my hand back there, and it turned out to be John Force. And he came and said, sir, I want to shake your hand. And I said, well, I appreciate that, but why? And he said, well, the fuel guy that we buy nitromethane from said that Dorothy had told him that there's an old redneck track operator from South Georgia out there that was such a fan that he literally cried when you ran your daughter because it became emotional. And he said, I just want you to know how much I appreciate it. And I said, well, we appreciate you and what your family does for the sport. We just had a great conversation. And that's the kind of thing, I'm a fan, a big fan of motorsports, NASCAR and NHRA. One night we had an award ceremony, and this little fellow was in the crowd. It turned out to be a guy named Rex White. And Rex White was carrying the banner for Chevrolet back in 1960 when the Fords and the Pontiacs were the thing and Chevrolet wasn't winning a lot of races. However, he was the NASCAR champion in 1960, and he went on and had a very successful career. He's a little guy, survivor of polio, and here he is driving a NASCAR car before they had power steering. I mean, it took an athlete to do that. But anyway, he's sitting in our award ceremony, and I found out who he was, and I told a story. You know Gene Hodges, one of my lifelong friends.
Yep.
Gene was a Pontiac man, and you know how kids are about the sports figures they idolize. Well, we were out on the playground in about the 6th grade, and Gene Hodges said that Rex White wouldn't have won the Governor's Cup race in Atlanta if Fireball Roberts hadn't blown up or whatever. And he insulted my man, and it led into a physical scuffle on the school grounds that got me sent to the principal. And the principal said, why did you whoop up on your buddy Gene? And I told him he insulted Rex White, that my favorite driver, and he said, "Oh, okay, go back to class then." Well, I told that story, and Rex White showed up the next year with an autographed copy of his autobiography and gave it to me at the next award ceremony. And now I have his phone number and talk to him from time to time. He's in his late 80s, I think. A great guy.
You were talking earlier, it's a dangerous sport. And I know at one point you had somebody got killed. I guess it was only one that's happened since you had the track.
We've had 6 people to die at the track, but mainly from heart attacks. And that one guy had what the $10 word was esophageal varices out there. Right. I mean, we've had bad things to happen. But this guy I'm real close friends with his son now, who is still racing with us. In fact, he was here this past weekend racing with us. But anyway, he was in his early 60s. He had a known heart condition. He had just had a physical and passed it. And he was in the staging lanes, nauseated and sweating. Told his buddy, "I need to make this pass. I can make this pass in 9+ seconds. I'll be okay. I need to know if the car is okay." And apparently had a heart attack going down the track because he never lifted, and hit the berm at the end of the track and was launched over a road into a field across the road. And,
right, sure. I know I picked him up. I can't remember if I was a coroner then or just a funeral home, but I was involved in that. I remember it. But I remember
a nice guy, and his son's equally nice guy. We've gotten to know him real well.
But that's true, and no matter what you do, that's things happen. So,
I hate to bring this up, but it's dangerous, and we all understand that, and we all do everything we can to make it safe. However, the CDC did a study on that one year, and they said it's right there with golf as far as risk. And, golfing is pretty dangerous. You've got golf balls flying around everywhere and lightning strikes and all that kind of thing. So we were right there next to golf.
Yeah, there's a liability in whatever you do. There's just a chance something's going to happen. So, Ed, I know that you've done this a long time, but when you saw the track, you really got into racing more, didn't you? I mean, aren't you racing more? And so you're talking about with your issue with spina bifida, and I happen to know this weekend you putting all the young people to shame out there at the racetrack. So talk a little bit about your actual racing and talk about this past weekend. I thought we were all following. Dorothy was posting on Facebook, and everybody was following and pulling for you. I bet everybody at that track was pulling for you except the family of the guy that you were racing in the finals, right?
Actually, some of the folks I put out came and tried and helped us in later rounds and all. It's a family. It is a really good family-oriented sport, and we are all close. But anyway, I'm an anachronism, and the way that I do my driving is kind of outdated. I've still got the same technique of driving that I was using in 1984. I've got they are using throttle stops. It's a precision driving contest in this index racing that we do. And I'm doing it the way we were doing it 40 years ago. And all these other guys have progressed where they're going a lot faster at the finish line than I am. But my lapse time is the same as theirs. And they go whistling by me at the finish line, but hopefully it's too late when they do that. So anyway, I had to go 6 rounds to win, and I went 5. Put out 2 or 3 of these guys were my best friends. I mean, they didn't cut me any slack, but I actually won 2 rounds. I had 2 rounds that I was just lucky in, and then I had a bye run into the finals, and this guy from North Carolina put one on me in the finals. He had a 9,000th package that I had to beat, and there was no way I could do it. It was a lot of fun, and people were so nice to us this past weekend. It brought it home how we love these people. Our customers that we've been racing with for 40 years.
Well, everybody knows you, and everybody knows you started that track and you founded it, and you're an icon in those circles, and you're an icon in Reynolds, period. But you certainly are an icon out there at that race, and I bet people will love it. They were eating it up. I mean, look at the old man out there beating them.
Right after I would run, and it was televised on NHRA.TV, and there were several ways you could watch it being live streamed. people were texting me after every round. You know, I'd have to sit there and answer texts for a long
I'm
time
sure.
when I should have been running the weather. But that's another thing. We have attracted. I idolized your daddy, and he always wanted to bring stuff to Reynolds. So everywhere I go, I try to get people to move. You need to move to Reynolds. We've got this we can offer you.
Right.
One of the best people that does live streaming is a fellow named Mark Walter. That's his. Mark's the daddy, Matt's the son. But he and his wife Joanne were living in Warner Robins, and they traveled there in North Carolina today, live streaming an event from Galat, North Carolina. But they were living out of town and traveling all over the place doing this. And I suggested he move to Reynolds. And my cousin Bruce Swearingen,
Right.
had moved out of a smaller building because his business is so good with 4S Wildlife Solutions. He had to move into what was formerly the Gresco building, a huge building in town. So he rented his building to my buddy who moved here and now is looking for a house to move to Reynolds. His business is already here. We made a serious effort to get Mr. Lucas of the Lucas Oil Company to put a distribution center in Reynolds. You know, you can't sell what you don't have, Bruce. And Taylor County has got three things. We've got retirement opportunities, we've got recreation, and we've got transportation. We're so close to I-75, and we own the beautiful Fall Line Freeway, 4-lane east and west. And you can get anywhere in the southeast from Reynolds, Georgia. Transportation smiles on us. We've had people move here, retired pitchers from the New York Yankees, and he moved here because he wanted to raise his son in a rural area, and he likes to hunt, and he's got hunting property. We've got every kind of critter you want to shoot at here in Taylor County. Wow. And he's got 2 drag cars. So, you know, what better place for him to move to? And there's so many people that need to discover the wonders of this area, you know.
One thing's for sure, I talk about Reynolds everywhere I go, and I have for the last 25 years. And it was heartwarming to be in Reynolds this weekend. In town, before I went out to the track, in town, that was the most people I've ever seen. My wife came in a little after me. She parked at the cemetery. The cemetery was full of cars. And she walked from the cemetery. As many times I've been to that cemetery, I've never walked there from town. And it was incredible how many people were there. But I also know, and again, you got some young people there that are stirring it up, that are doing things to make it better. And to the new store that opened in a store that closed up during the Great Depression and started in 1913. But also your part in this is huge. And who knows what's going to happen, but it's a good time to be from Reynolds. You've had a huge piece of that. There's no question about it. And I also know that you have been awarded some stuff. I don't even know how many you've got, but one of them I know was you were inducted into the Hall of Fame.
The NHRA Division II has a monument there at Big Daddy Don Garlett's Museum in Ocala, Florida. And every year they induct 4 guys into the Hall of Fame, and we were lucky enough to go in 16, I believe it was. It's a humbling experience because some of these things they have voted on, and our customers thought enough of us to vote for us. And this was a selection committee that got input from racers, and people were kind enough to let us do that. Nobody has ever enjoyed or appreciated being inducted more than me. I can tell you, I talked too long that night, but I was speechless there at the beginning of my remarks because Dorothy followed me up to the stage, and I thought she was going up there to take pictures, but she didn't have a phone out. I said, you know, I think she forgot a phone or something. Well, the division director of the NHRA had said, we want you to tell something about Ed that people here that go to the racetrack don't know about him. So she had prepared a speech that it's as good as some of the stuff you do, that's humorous kind of, you know, and she gets up there and said, I think the thing I need to tell you about is how many times he's been married. And she starts doing that. By the way, one of my ex-in-laws was actually recording the event. She was sitting at our table in the crowd. So Miss Georgia, you know her real well.
Oh, yeah.
And sweet lady. But anyway, We went on, and she gave me down the country and told all about it, and that Ed's been married 5 times and I'm number 5. And, it just,
I bet they loved it.
yeah, everybody was laughing so hard. And of course, I was sitting back there saying, what is fixing to happen here? I got roasted real well.
I tell you, I can proudly say that I knew all 5 of your wives.
Yeah,
That's true.
But I would tell you that we were planning my funeral one time, and I said, darling, you really need to save a pew for my exes. And Dorothy said, if you make me do that, I'll be sitting on that pew. And but unfortunately, we lost 2 of them that, 2 have passed on.
I remember going out to do that wedding, and I'd never done a wedding in my life. And
you did a good job.
Well, let me tell you what happened. I stopped at the funeral home. Kathy went with me. I thought I was going out there, just y'all were going to be there. I went in the organ bench in the chapel of the funeral home and got a Methodist hymnal that I knew had a marriage ceremony in the back of it. So I took it with me, and I was looking for it as Kathy was driving to find the thing. And I got out there, and everybody in the county was there. It was a huge crowd. I almost fainted.
Well,
Wow.
We appreciate you doing it. We wanted you to do it, and you did a good job. And
Well, I've done a lot of stuff, and that was one of them. I can tell you that. That was amazing.
Yeah.
The thing that hits me in this conversation, and literally a minute ago having chills, literally, because I'm thinking, you started this thing. It was a dream. Your dad thought you'd lost your mind. He would have thought that if he was still living. He certainly thought, no, you're a farmer. We got this farmland. This is what we're here to do. You're educated to do it. You know about it.
Bruce, let me interrupt you for a minute.
Go ahead.
I'm lucky enough to go to heaven, and I think I will. I have a relationship with the Lord. I think I will. But the one thing I'm dreading is the cussing I'm going to take from my dad, to taking his cotton field that was a 2-bale an acre cotton field and turning it into a drag strip.
I think that what he's going to say is, Ed, you know what? I was wrong, brother. You got it right. That's what he's going to say. And it really hit me. It really hit me that you started that. It was a dream. You had not a lot of support in the community. You had people thinking, has he lost his mind? What's he going to do? We never had a drag strip here. How is he going to make money? And you fast forward it, and you get inducted to the NHRA Hall of Fame in Ocala, Florida. It's just a heck of a story. And it's just you did something right. And you're well known in these circles. You're certainly well known in our town. You're an advocate for our town, and you're very important to it. I don't live there, but it's always going to be home as long as I live. Yeah. I know that you've learned some lessons in life, and I know there's people out here that could hear a little bit from you. If you had to give a lesson or two you've learned that you think is worth passing on to others who may be listening, what would that be?
Well, there are several things. One is stay connected with your family. Bless Ann's heart. My daughter has suffered because of some of what I have done. I was not with her lots of times when I would like to have been, but she's turned out well in spite of it.
I'm going to tell you, I love Ann. I send her messages every now and then. I saw her the other day briefly. I didn't get a chance to talk to her. She's beautiful, and I love your stepchildren. I mean, you got great family.
Yeah, I do. In spite of my not doing as I should have done for them because of the distraction of doing all this, she's raised a great daughter who's doing real well, and recently got an internship for a job that she'll probably be with for the rest of her life, and Ann is great at what she does, and I get reports from people who are her customers, people that she treats at the hospital over there who talk about her, and that makes me feel so good that in spite of anything I've done wrong, it all worked out well.
Right.
But that's important.
You had a passion. Your passion created a dream, and you chased it, and you're 74 years old, looking back over your life. What is the message of your life? Well,
one of the things, and I'm not saying it because it's you, but I aspired to be like your daddy. He was such an inspiration to me that he did not know his own limitations. He did not know the limitations of rentals. When he started the Kiwanis Club here, the international president was looking for a place to come in Georgia, and some sort of way, Mr. Ed politicked him into coming to Reynolds in the gymnasium in the summertime, and it was 100 degrees in there. And I mean, we really didn't have the infrastructure to accommodate him, but he pulled it off. And that's the kind of thing he did all through his life. And before there was a Chamber of Commerce and a Development Authority and all these people, there was Ed Goddard. He sort of did that. I want to be remembered sort of that I was a later day Ed Goddard, you know.
Wow.
We thought so much of him that the whole time we had the track, we gave an Ed Goddard Memorial Award at our ceremony every year at the end of the year. And every year I told that story. So all our customers knew who he was because of my story every year.
He never got a chance to see it, but he connected with your dream and your passion, and he was not kidding. He wanted you to be successful.
He knew it was going to happen, you know.
Yeah.
He sure did.
Well, and I guarantee you, your dad and mom are smiling too, and we're all getting older, and when you get this age, you start looking back. We spend more time looking back now than we did before. You've had a great run, physically and figuratively. You've had a great run, my friend, and I thank you for being on here.
Thank you for thank you for exposing Reynolds. I mean, you're doing what we all are trying to do, you know. You've been an asset to this community they buried a lot of people here, and y'all have always done a great, it provided great service. It not just that, but the store you had. The store in town was very much like the one that's opening now, except it was 20 times bigger. And I remember my daddy going in there and buying a peach sprayer from your daddy. Now, how many grocery stores can you go to and buy a spraying machine, a Meyer spraying machine to spray peach trees? I mean, that's just, you know. So.
Ed, you're a good man, my friend. Thank you for joining me here.
And I appreciate you and what you're doing.
Thank you, man. Appreciate it very much. I appreciate you. Keep on. Let's keep on keeping on.
Let's do it.
All right, man. You take care. Thank you.
You too.
Viewing life from a hearse, it could be worse. Laugh, think, and cry with the country undertaker.